June 23, 1944. The middle of the Atlantic Ocean, about 870 miles west of the Cape Verde Islands. Commander Uno Kameo stood inside the small control room of the big Japanese cargo submarine called I-52. It carried 2 tons of gold, 120 tons of tin, and other important war supplies, heading for German-occupied France. Through his periscope, he saw the German submarine U-530 move away into the dark after giving them radar equipment and 2 German experts. The meeting had gone well. Soon his submarine would rise to the surface to travel toward Europe at night, moving fast at 15 knots under dark skies. Everything looked perfect, but within 3 hours, Commander Kameo and his 94 crew members would all be dead killed by a new technology they did not even know existed. The sound of their submarine breaking apart was caught on wire recorders by American planes flying above, listening with special floating microphones dropped into the sea. These sonar buoys released from an Avenger torpedo bomber sent back the noise of I-52's final moments, showing not just the loss of one submarine, but the total shock to Japanese Navy confidence. The ocean that was once Japan's path to empire had now turned into an American listening field where nothing could hide. The numbers from this new power difference were already showing across the Pacific, proving Japan's beliefs about its submarines and crews were wrong. From 1941 to 1945, American submarines sank 1,314. Japanese ships weighing 5.3 million tons, making up 56% of all Japan's merchant losses. Japanese submarines, even though large and advanced, sank only 184 Allied ships, weighing 1 million tons. This was not just a difference in numbers, but in how both nations thought about undersea war factory strength and new inventions. While Japan made the biggest submarines, even ones that could carry planes, America built smarter sonar systems that could hear them from many miles away. While Japanese engineers built amazing submarines, American factories made sonar buoys, FM sonar sound-guided torpedoes, and radar systems faster than Japan could even think of ways to stop them. This change did not happen in one big moment, but through thousands of smaller times when Japanese sailors slowly learned they were being hunted by things they could not see, followed by machines they did not understand, and destroyed by a huge industrial power beyond their reach. Lieutenant Commander Nukio Nambu, who led the giant Japanese submarine aircraft carrier I-401, later told American officers after he surrendered in August 1945 that he knew Japan had lost. Not from a battle, but from hearing American radio calls during patrols. The calm way the Americans talked the many supplies they had, and how perfectly they worked together across thousands of miles, showed power Japan could never match. But for most Japanese submarine crews, this truth came from real and frightening fights, with American anti-submarine weapons fights that left few alive and most hopeless. The story of how these crews learned about America's stronger technology is not filled with big fights or brave endings. It is a story of slow discovery and deep shock that turned proud sailors into men who understood their defeat long before their country surrendered. When World War II began in December 1941, Japan's submarine fleet was among the best on Earth. Japan had around 70 long-range submarines, many with new and bold designs. The I-400 class submarines, the biggest in the world until nuclear ones came in the 1960s, were about 400 feet long and weighed 5,900 tons underwater. They could hold 3 Sarin float planes in a sealed hangar, launch them with a catapult, and could even strike places like New York City or the Panama Canal. Each I-400 submarine had enough fuel to travel around the world 1.5 times, covering about 37,500 miles at 14 knots, showing truly amazing engineering. These submarines had special balance systems that helped them stay still underwater, plus electric cables that stopped magnetic mines from exploding near them. Radar to spot planes in the sky and sound absorbing. coating that made sonar waves weaker. Even the smaller Japanese subs were amazing. The Type C cargo submarines like the I-52 could travel 21,000 miles carrying important war materials between Japan and its allies. Fast attack subs moved quietly across the Pacific, firing long-range torpedoes and diving deep to avoid being seen. Japanese sailors trained hard-practiced silent moves and knew their submarines like their own hands. Many had years of sea experience. Commander Tatsunosuke Arizumi, who later led submarine missions, was known as one of Japan's best underwater experts. His men were well-trained, skillful, and sure of themselves. They had reasons to be sure. Early in the war, Japanese subs helped attack Pearl Harbor, spied on American bases, supported fleets, and hunted Allied ships. Their plan focused on helping the Navy protecting its ships, watching the enemy, and hitting high-value war targets. But unlike American submarines that attacked cargo ships, Japan's subs went after warships only. This choice would turn out very bad, because while Japanese subs chased aircraft carriers, American subs were sinking the merchant ships that kept Japan's war economy alive. Even worse, this plan meant Japanese subs met American anti-sub weapons only in the most dangerous places where U.S. forces were ready and strong. The first time they met Sonar Buoys was in 1944, when American factories had already made the system perfect. These sonar buoys were small, floating sound devices dropped from planes that listened for submarines and sent the sound back by radio. The British first made them in 1944 under the code name High, but America quickly improved them. The change was huge. Before this, planes could only see subs when they were above water, but when they dived, they disappeared. Sonar buoys changed that. Planes could now drop 5 buoys, purple, orange, blue, red, and yellow, to make an underwater listening field. The plane would listen to each buoy one by one, catching any sound made by a submarine's propeller's engines or movement. This new system worked so well. It soon became regular gear on every American anti-submarine plane in 1944 and 1945. For Commander Uno Kameo and his crew on the I-52, the first sign of trouble came at 11:40 at night on June 23, 1944. Lieutenant Commander Jesse D. Taylor, flying an Avenger torpedo bomber from the escort carrier USS Bogue, spotted the I-52 on radar while it was moving on the surface. Taylor dropped bright flares, lighting up the giant sub, then attacked with depth bombs as the I-52 tried to dive. The first attack just missed, with explosions close on both sides as the submarine went deeper. What happened next changed anti-submarine warfare forever. Taylor dropped a purple sonar buoy into the sea, and within seconds his radio man heard the clear hum of submarine propellers sent up from the buoy. Now, Taylor could follow the I-52 underwater, seeing every turn and move, and setting up for the perfect hit. He released a Mark 24 mine called Fido, an acoustic torpedo, that listened for propeller sounds and chased them until it struck. The sonar buoys caught everything: the blast, the noise of metal tearing apart, the cracking and crunching sounds like a tin can being crushed. The I-52 sank all the way down 17,000 feet, carrying Commander Kameo, 94 crew, 14 passengers, and 2 German experts to their deaths. The sonar buoy recordings were saved in the National Archives on thin wire reels marked Gordon Wire, number 1 and number 2, keeping the final moments of a submarine whose crew never knew what kind of new weapon had destroyed them. The loss of the I-52 showed a terrifying new power, and when Japanese sailors later heard the story through secret reports, they realized American planes could now track submarines underwater. The meaning of this was huge. Every time a Japanese submarine went underwater to escape a plane, it wasn't really escaping at all. It was just hiding from sight, while still clearly visible to American sound sensors. The U.S. hunter-killer groups built around small aircraft. Carriers like the USS Bogue used radar sonar buoys and sound-guided torpedoes together in a single system that turned hunting submarines from a lucky find into a sure kill. The USS Buoys group alone sank 13 German and Japanese submarines between February 1943 and July 1945, using the same method again and again. Japanese sailors soon began reporting strange things. Planes showed up exactly over their diving spots, like they could see through the water. Depth charges exploded right on target, even when subs were deep below. Torpedoes followed their turns as if controlled by invisible hands. They were being hunted by weapons their navy didn't have, couldn't stop, and barely understood. The fear grew worse in Operation Barney in June 1945, when 9 American submarines fitted with FM sonar slipped into the Sea of Japan, through minefields that Japan thought no one could cross. That sea was meant to be Japan's safe area, guarded by 4 lines of underwater mines in the Tsushima Strait. Japanese ships moved there freely, thinking no enemy sub could pass. But FM sonar made for finding underwater obstacles sent out a special ringing sound whenever it spotted a mine, a sound U.S. sailors called Hell's Bells. With it, American subs could see the minefield shapes find clear paths and move safely through barriers Japan believed unbreakable. On June 4, 1945, 3 subs, Sea Dog, Creval, and Spadefish, entered Tsushima Strait, under the water, their sonar drawing pictures of mines on their screens. The Hell's Bells rang non-stop as they passed between mines only 50 yards apart. After 20 hours, all 3 came out safe in the Sea of Japan. Soon, 2 more groups followed, and within days, 9 U.S. submarines were moving freely in waters Japan had thought totally safe. The results were huge. Between June 9th and June 24th, 1945, those 9 submarines sank 28. Japanese ships weighing 54,786 tons, including a submarine and a destroyer. The American boats moved wherever they wanted, surfacing at night to recharge batteries and diving during the day to attack ships that thought they were safe from any underwater danger. Japanese naval leaders were shocked when reports started coming in about submarine attacks deep inside the Sea of Japan. Survivors told stories of American submarines moving freely, attacking any time and escaping easily. The mental effect was crushing. If U.S. submarines could enter the most guarded waters and pass through minefields that had taken years to build, then no place was safe anymore. The ocean itself now belonged to the enemy. Japanese sub-commanders understood this right away. They were being hunted by weapons and systems their country could not build. Every mission turned into a fight just to stay alive, instead of to win. The gap in technology went far beyond sonar. American subs had radar that could spot ships more than 20 miles away in good weather. Japanese subs did not even get radar until June 1944, and then only a few sets that worked worse than the American ones. This gave the United States a huge edge. Their submarines could see Japanese ships first, follow them from far away, and plan attacks while staying hidden. U.S. submarines also had help from the ultra-code breaking project, which cracked Japan's naval messages. This meant America often knew where Japanese submarines would patrol, what routes they would take, and when they would move, even before the Japanese crews knew. With better radar, sonar, and secret intelligence, Japanese subs were sailing in seas where the enemy already knew their position, their path, and the tools to find them. Lieutenant Commander Nukio Nambu, who led the I-401, later told U.S. officers that it felt like being watched every second, even when deep in empty water. His fear was real, not imagined. The huge difference in industrial power became clear after the war when survivors saw American shipyards. Japan could barely keep 70 submarines working during the war, while America built 314 between 1940, one in 1945, replacing its losses faster than the Ryu. Battles could take them, could destroy them. American shipyards built submarines at speeds Japan thought impossible. Mare Island in California, Electric Boat in Connecticut, Portsmouth in New Hampshire, and many others worked day and night launching new fleet submarines faster than Japan could imagine. These subs showed an industrial power Japan simply couldn't match. The American Gato and Balao-class submarines, though smaller than Japan's huge ones, were made with standard parts built in many factories. Engines, batteries, torpedoes, periscopes, and sonar systems all came from different places, but arrived perfectly on time to be assembled. One Gato-class submarine used about 140,000 parts, made by companies in 32 states. The supply line never failed. When subs needed fixing parts were ready. When one was lost, a new one replaced it within months. Japanese subs damaged in battle often sat for weeks or even months waiting for repairs because of part shortages, crowded docks, and slow industry. The torpedo problem showed the same gap in skill and power. At the start of the war, American submarines used the Mark 14 torpedo, which had many problems like running too deep and not exploding right. For almost 2 years, U.S. crews fought with torpedoes that often missed or failed to blow up. This could have been Japan's chance to take advantage, but it wasn't. American sailors tested the weapons themselves, found the faults, and fixed them even when their own leaders doubted them. By September 1943, the Mark 14 was working right, and at the same time, the new electric Mark 18 torpedo came into service. It left no trail in the water, so targets had no warning. The Mark 24 mine, really an acoustic torpedo called Fido, could be dropped from planes and would follow the sound of a sub's propellers until it hit. Japan never built anything like it. Their torpedoes were good, but not special, and their factories could not make enough of them to match U.S. numbers. American subs went to sea carrying 24 torpedoes on each patrol they fired without worry, because new torpedoes were always ready. Japanese submarines carried fewer and had to use them carefully since replacements were hard to get. These big differences in machines and industry made the result certain over time. Japanese crews slowly saw the truth. Every mission, every fight, every close escape showed them the same thing: the ocean now belonged to America. In 1944, American submarines sank about one Japanese ship every single day. That year alone, they destroyed 492 Japanese cargo ships, weighing more than 2,387,000 tons. Japan could not build new ships fast enough to replace the ones lost. Its merchant fleet dropped from around 6 million tons in 1941 to only 2 million tons by August 1945, with just 320,000 tons still able to carry goods. This wasn't only a military loss, it was a slow choking of Japan's whole war economy. Food from Southeast Asia could not reach Japan's people. Oil from the Dutch East Indies could not reach its fuel plants. Rubber, tin, and tungsten stayed stuck overseas while American submarines guarded the sea routes. By 1945, American submarines could hardly find big enough ships to attack because there were almost none left. The few still afloat stayed near coasts, used narrow paths, too risky for subs, or just stayed in port, afraid to move. After the war, Japanese leaders told their government that losing their ships was the biggest cause of defeat, saying American submarines did more to win the war than any other weapon. For Japanese submariners who survived and later saw American docks and ships, the shock was deep. Captain Ariazumi, who helped create the I-400 program and was one of Japan's top submarine men, killed himself aboard I-401 instead of surrendering. He knew what others had begun to realize: Japan had fought a country whose technology and industry were far beyond anything they had expected. When I-401 and I-400, the huge submarine aircraft carriers, gave up in August 1945, American sailors who went aboard the captured subs were amazed by their size. They were longer than American destroyers and heavier than any sub America had built, and they looked like something from the future, yet they had done nothing in battle. They never fired a single shot. The planned attack on Ulithi Atoll was cancelled when the war ended, and the planned strike on the Panama Canal never happened. These giant subs, built with so much work and rare materials, ended up useless because American technology made their missions impossible. They couldn't sneak close to targets they couldn't move safely in American waters, and they couldn't escape the hunter-killer groups, the sonar buoys, the radar, the sound-tracking torpedoes, and all. The anti-sub systems America had mastered. When American crews studied the captured Japanese subs, they found both clever design and serious flaws. Their hulls were weaker than German or American ones, so they couldn't dive as deep. They were easy to find on sonar because their large size made loud echoes that could be picked up miles away. They didn't get radar until very late in the war, and never had the special FM sonar that helped Americans spot mines. Their anti-aircraft guns were weak against American planes that hunted them. Worst of all, they had no automatic fire control system like Americans used. American subs had computers that figured out the right angle to fire torpedoes by working out target speed, distance, and direction automatically. Japanese subs had to do this by hand, which took time and risked mistakes that could give away their position. The difference in technology wasn't small, it was huge, and it affected everything they did. The human cost was terrible. Japan lost 130 subs in the war, about double America's loss rate. Of the 70 subs Japan had in 1941, plus the new ones built later, most were sunk by American anti-sub forces using the very tools the Japanese had learned to fear sonar radar planes, depth charges, and hunter-killer teams. About 10,000 Japanese submariners were killed during the war, a death rate of more than 70%. What had once been seen as a proud and honorable duty became known as certain death by the war's end. Young men sent to serve on subs knew they were unlikely to come back. Families cried when sons left for submarine training, already knowing the chances. The Japanese submarine force that began the war full of pride ended it, crushed, beaten, and stripped of hope, its men broken, and its power destroyed by better enemy machines. The change in their minds was much like what happened to captured German soldiers in America, but it happened in a different way. German prisoners saw America's wealth and comfort with their own eyes, while Japanese submariners saw America's power through deadly sea battles. Both learned the same truth in the end, that Japan and Germany had fought nations with technology and factories far beyond anything the Axis could match. When the Japanese submariners surrendered in August 1945, the proof of American strength was all around them. They were taken aboard American submarines and shown machines they had never imagined. They visited naval bases and saw how America could build endlessly without running out of supplies. They saw the sonar buoys that had hunted them, the FM sonar, that let American subs pass through minefields, the radar that let them see far beyond sight, and the sound-tracking torpedoes that had sunk so many Japanese subs. Lieutenant Commander Nambu, after surrendering, I-401 was taken aboard the USS Seagund by Lieutenant Commander Stephen L. Johnson, who showed him around the boat. Nambu studied the radar sonar fire control system and torpedo loading gear and saw that every single thing was better than what Japan had built, and most important, everything actually worked. The equipment didn't fail. The systems did what they were made to do. The American crew handled their submarine easily, knowing their tools were the best, and that supplies and repairs would always come. Johnson's men had survived 9 war patrols sunk. Japanese ships dodged enemy hunters and still expected to make it home alive, while Japanese submariners never could. Japanese submariners never felt the same safety or belief their American enemies did. They knew that American machines could always find them, follow them, and destroy them wherever they went. The mental strain was huge. Lieutenant Commander Nambu later told his captors that the moment he truly knew Japan had lost was not after the atomic bombs, but months earlier when he listened to American radio, traffic, and heard how easily and calmly their forces worked together across thousands of miles. Every message showed the same thing: an ocean full of ships and planes run with perfect order and endless supplies, using tools far beyond what Japan could build. After the surrender, that truth became even clearer. Japanese submariners were taken to American bases like Sasebo, where their captured boats were inspected, and to Tokyo Bay, where the surrender took place with American submarines standing proudly in view. Vice Admiral Charles A. Lockwood, commander of the U.S. Pacific Submarine Fleet, made sure his flag flew on the captured I-400 and I-401 during the surrender ceremony aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945. The message was plain: American submarines had beaten the Japanese ones through better machines and greater industry. Later, I-400 and I-401 were taken to Hawaii so American naval engineers could study them closely. Japanese crewmen went along as helpers and watched as the Americans took their boats apart piece by piece, photographing everything and writing down every measurement. The Americans worked carefully with respect for the design but without fear. They knew why these subs had failed. It wasn't bad seamanship, it was that America had stronger technology backed by factories that could never be matched. The last lesson came in 1946 when I-400, I-401, and the other captured submarines were towed out to sea near Hawaii and sunk on purpose as target. Practiced partly to keep the Soviets from demanding to study them. Class submarines had been huge but useless, and that memory guided Japan's new way of thinking. After the war, Japanese engineers and leaders realized that power didn't come from building the biggest machines, but from mastering precision and technology that actually worked. The I-400 class had shown what happened when size and ambition outgrew practical skill. American forces sinking those subs without hesitation made the point even stronger. Japan's proudest submarines had ended as target practice for a country that no longer even needed them for study. For Japanese submariners, this was painful proof that Japan's best had never been enough. The ocean they had once believed they could rule had always belonged to America. Survivors returning home carried that truth with them. They wrote books, gave talks, and joined veterans groups that tried to understand why their proud force had failed so completely. Every discussion came back to the same answers. Japan had been brave, but not prepared. Its factories were too few, its machines too old, its thinking too narrow. America had outbuilt, outthought, and outlasted them. Courage and discipline could not defeat radar, sonar code breaking, and endless production lines. These men taught the next generation that success in the modern world depended on technology and quality, not numbers or slogans. The same lessons that came from crushed submarines at the bottom of the Pacific helped shape Japan's post-war rise. In factories, schools, and design offices across the country, people remembered the I-400 class and what it symbolized. From that understanding came a national drive for precision innovation and reliability, the foundation of Japan's economic miracle in the 1950s and 1960s. Japan's submarines had looked amazing, but they didn't really work well. After the war, Japan changed its whole way of building things. Instead of trying to make the biggest or flashiest machines, the goal became to make smaller, smarter, and more reliable products that always worked. Companies like Sony, Toyota, and Honda followed this new idea. They learned that being great at technology meant more than just inventing clever designs. It meant making sure every part worked together with top-quality control, steady production, and constant improvement. Many former Navy officers, especially submarine men, joined these companies, bringing lessons learned from their wartime failures. What America had shown them was that success came from complete systems, not scattered brilliance. By the 1960s and 70s, Japan's new Navy trained with Americans, used their sonar and tactics, and built submarines with American help. The two nations that once fought now work together. Understanding that technology and industry decide wars as much as bravery does. For the old submariners, this change proved their beliefs right. Japan had to match American skill, not just admire it. By the 1980s, Japan's submarines ranked among the best in the world, created by people who had learned hard lessons from defeat. The recorded sounds of I-52's final moments still rest in American archives, proving how advanced the technology had become. Later scientists at Johns Hopkins studied those recordings and confirmed that the submarine was destroyed by an acoustic homing torpedo guided by sonar buoys, the same kind that Japan never managed to create. Those inventions shaped modern navies everywhere. In the end, the story of Japan's submarines was not just about war, but about how new technology and massive production power could decide everything, no matter how brave or skilled the people were. Japanese submariners were not weak, and they were not unskilled. They were brave men fighting with poor tools against an enemy whose machines were far better. Their slow realization that defeat was certain was much like what German prisoners learned in America, though it happened in a different way. Both groups saw American strength in technology and production, and both carried those lessons home to help rebuild their countries later. They understood that success came from matching American progress, not from hating it. The seas that Japanese crews once sailed proudly had become American seas controlled by science and factories. Small sonar buoys floating on the water could hear hidden submarines' radar, could see farther than any eyes, and smart torpedoes could chase targets by sound alone. Ships and planes now worked together like one big machine that left no room for escape. By mid-1945, the change was total. Japan's submarines had no safe ocean, no secure port, and no chance of survival. When 9 American submarines sailed out of the Sea of Japan, after sinking 28 ships in the most protected waters of all, it proved Japan's defeat was final. If those barriers could be crossed by technology, then Japan's power at sea was gone. The ocean now belonged to those who mastered science and industry. The submariners felt this deeply. They had been hunted and destroyed by weapons they couldn't even understand. Those few who lived knew Japan had lost the moment America's factories and engineers reached full strength. The sea had never really been Japan's. It had only waited for the truth to show itself. America's sonar radar torpedoes and giant industry had changed submarine warfare forever, and no amount of skill or courage could fight against that. The survivors knew the sea was no longer theirs. It now belonged to the nation that had built the machines to rule it. America had won the undersea war not because its sailors were better, but because its science and industry were stronger. That victory still shapes navies today. Sonar is still the heart of submarine warfare, acoustic. Torpedoes are standard weapons, and sonar buoys far better than those from 1944 now guard oceans all over the world dropped by ships and planes. The same technological race that once stunned Japanese submariners continues even now with submarines that can do things both sides of World War II could never imagine. Yet the truth remains the same. In modern war, it is technology and production that decide who wins. Japanese submariners learned this through defeat and carried the lesson into rebuilding their country. Their experience changed Japan's industry and defense planning for generations. The huge submarines that once showed Japan's sea power now sit as museum pieces or lie deep under the ocean, silent reminders of great skill beaten by greater science. The men who served on them learned a lesson that still matters today. It is about how technology shapes the fate of nations, deciding who prospers and who fails. The story of Japanese crews hearing American sonar buoys and realizing the sea was no longer theirs stands as proof that war had changed. It was no longer won by bravery alone, but by invisible forces of science and machines. Commander Uno Kameo and the thousands who died were defeated by an industrial power they could not even imagine until it was too late. Those who lived carried that truth forward, shaping Japan's future and the world's navies for decades to come. The ocean has always belonged to those who master its technology, and that truth remains the same today.